For many African Americans, it may prove very difficult to trace their family history and genealogy from before the end of slavery to the current day. However, with the emergence of various tools and resources, it has proved to be much more feasible to trace back through our ancestry and paint a picture of who they were, where they lived, and also some of the historical events that happened and shaped their lives. Greetings, viewer. My name is Amon Thomas, and I will be taking you through my genealogy from the maternal side of my family in order to depict the lives of some of my ancestors and chronologically go through all the information that I was able to gather through my personal resources and also online databases and storage, such as Ancestry and FamilySearch.com. To begin, we will go back to January 7th, 1846, in Halifax, North Carolina. This is the birth date of my great-great-great-grandmother, Lethia New. Lethia New was the child of William New and Rebecca Clark, an enslaved from North Carolina and an enslaved African, respectively. Her ethnicity was able to be determined by the record of her being recorded as a mulatto in the 1870 census. She gave birth to her first of several children at the age of 16 to an unnamed man, which we can only assume may or may not have been her enslavement. During this period, it was common for enslavers to rape the enslaved female, and many whites had established an over-sexualized image of black women based on a figure named Sarah Barman, which was perceived by the name Hot and Top Venus. Stereotypes such as this and other stereotypical figures such as Jim Crow hindered Africans after the Civil War and made it seem as though they were incapable of learning, working hard, and overall depicted them as uncivilized in the public eye. This played a factor in some of the struggles Africans faced post the Civil War. In numerous census reports, Lethia could neither read nor write. It is also concluded that she worked on a tobacco farm after the end of enslavement, and at some point after moved to Patrick, Virginia, where she meets her second husband and changed her last name to Clark, making her Lethia Clark. She also gave birth to my great-great-grandmother, Julia Clark. Due to severe toll the Civil War had on the state of Virginia, many free Africans had little choice but to work, including Lethia, who worked at a tobacco factory and later on a farm. Lethia and her husband worked tirelessly, while Lethia's eldest daughter, Annie, helped raise 9 younger siblings during the day. Not much else is known about them other than that Jessie passed away in 1916 and Lethia in 1925, both in Patrick, Virginia, where both of the burials are located according to findagrave.com. Between 1910 and 1920, Julia would go on to marry her husband, Bowling Clark, an African American. At the time, America had joined in the First World War, which he had not been selected in. According to census reports, Julia was a housewife and primarily cared for their children as they were growing up. At the same time, African Americans were still fighting for racial equality and justice. This agenda was pushed across the nations with the establishment of the newly founded NAACP. The group composed of many historic figures such as W.E. Du Bois, Thurgood Marshall, and Roy Wilkins. The group was a large opponent of the American white supremacy hate group known as the KKK that had steadily risen into prominence with the end of enslavement. From my grandfather's memory of his grandmother, he stated that she had seen them on numerous occasions. He also stated that she was a heavy supporter of the NAACP's cause. My great-grandmother, Nanny Clark, the child of Bowling and Julia, also was born in 1910 and grew up on a farm in Virginia, before moving to South Carolina and meeting her husband, Roy Macon Sr. The couple later moved to Washington, D.C., where they gave birth to my grandfather in 1944 and 5 other children. My grandfather described his life growing up with some of the following key points. He and his siblings lived a good life as youth and were provided with many of the things they wanted in life. He was the first in his family to attend high school and soon dropped out his freshman year and began the trade of mechanics and started working on cars. Some historic events he was able to recount included the Civil Rights Movement, prominent figures such as Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King, and Angela Davis. He also said he participated in the March on Washington. He also described how the assassination sent a wave throughout the community of DC. My grandfather married Ethelene Makins, my grandmother, an African-American woman who had served several years in the military and gave birth to my mother, Monica Makins, in Washington, D.C. My mother recounts that they referred to the city as the Chocolate City due to it having a high density of African Americans. In 1978, she moved to Landover, Maryland, which they lived in various neighboring areas of Prince George's County, Maryland, until my grandmother was able to finally purchase her own property in 1987. Growing up, my mother attended school in Washington, D.C. public school up to middle school before transferring over to Prince George's County Public Schooling, where she completed her education from middle school up to 1 year of community college at Prince George's Community College. She also met my father, Theodore Thomas Jr., who immediately after high school went on into the Army for 5 years and toured Germany. They gave birth to me, Amon Thomas, on March 19, 2000. Growing up, they instilled in me a heavy focus on maintaining my studies and made it a habit to include academics into my daily life. Even to this day, they make sure to regularly check in on my academics and well-being and make sure that I take full advantage of my education and make sure I learn the most that I can with the resources that my ancestors were restricted from having access to. My parents also implored me to learn and understand my history and to understand the standing of an African American in the United States of America. I will end this documentary with a famous speech on education by Barack Obama that I believe still resonates today in society for African Americans.
Then you've got to have a great education. We live in a global economy. And when you graduate, you're no longer going to be competing just with somebody here in D.C. for a great job. You're competing with somebody on the other side of the world, in China or in India, because jobs can go wherever they want because of the internet and because of technology. And the best jobs are going to go to people who are the best educated, whether in India or China or anywhere in the world. So when I took office almost 8 years ago, we knew that our education system was falling short when it came to preparing young people like you for that reality. Our public schools had been the